Media Melanie Talks TV. I'm Melanie, and today I'm back to cover the Silo Season 2 finale on Apple TV+, Into the Fire. And you guys, Bernie got played and he got burned. Do we think that Bernard is going to survive this fire incident? I'm going to say Juliette is probably okay because she has an actual fire suit from Silo 17. I am not feeling as optimistic for our friend Bernard, who it seems like his days of being a big bad in Silo 18 are over. But can the show be carried without Tim Robbins? That will be a big question moving into season 3, assuming that Bernard does not survive. Before we get into more of this finale, please be sure to go ahead and hit that subscribe button. While this is the last day of covering Silo for this season, I am covering Severance on Apple TV+. I will be covering The Hunting Party, a new procedural coming to NBC and Peacock. Also plan to cover Paradise on Hulu, a new show by Dan Fogelman starring Sterling K. Brown, and The White Lotus, which is coming up in February. So lots of great shows on the roster coming up. Be sure that you are here for all of them. All right, let's start with a conversation about this flashback we got. Now, initially, I thought to myself, could this actually be running concurrently on the surface while the people are underground and the silos are in fact an experiment? Well, eventually, once we saw that Pez dispenser, that for me was enough confirmation to say, okay, this is definitely the before times. This quite possibly looks like the origin story of the silos, which is something we've been getting little hints at with a lot of the characters in Silo 18, asking questions like, why would the humans on the surface ruin what they had? Why would you let something happen to this beautiful world and cause everybody to retreat underground? Well, I think we are finally going to get some answers, and I would imagine that we'll be going back and forth between Silo 18 and these flashbacks with Daniel and Helen. We learn Daniel is a Georgia congressman with engineering experience. Could he be the actual engineer and one of the founding fathers of the silo? Not only does he have a government position, but also he's clearly got the abilities and the education to be a driving force behind the silos. They scan the people at the bar for radiation when they come in. They are in Washington, D.C., based on the opening scene we got, based on that shot of the Capitol, and all of the president stuff that we see on the walls inside the bar. Helen starts asking Daniel about the dirty bomb from Iran. It does seem like there is an escalating nuclear situation between the two countries, but could this be a conspiracy? Now, if you've watched Fallout, you may remember that it was actually a U.S. government kind of cabal of billionaires who wanted to build the Fallout shelters to ensure that the powerful and elite would be able to survive in the vaults. Could the U.S. government or another force besides Iran have been behind the dirty bomb? Are they trying to blame somebody else? Are they trying to force human civilization underground? Or are they trying to force the experiments of people underground in the silos while there are still people living on the surface? It does seem like we'll maybe get into some geopolitical strife and conflict, getting more context into exactly what transpired that caused these silos to be built in the first place. And I guess my question too is, does Daniel already know the silos exist at this point and they're already in process? And maybe Helen has heard inklings of some big underground conspiracy going on, and that's kind of what she's actually trying to get to the bottom of? Or is this just setting the table for what exactly did cause the silos that needed to be built, and then we see Daniel kind of being a part of this process, getting them together? I would assume Helen ends up in one of the silos, given that we see the Pez dispenser as a relic from back in season 1. Whose ancestors could she possibly be? Same with Daniel. I'm really interested to see how the genealogy of it all works, and if we do end up getting a story with ancestral ties to these characters that we are seeing on the surface. And I just want to say, this was quite a surprise when this flashback came on. I'm sitting there, and all of a sudden, after the whole burning situation, we get a real show. And for a second, I thought, did it end and some other show is now playing? I literally hit pause on my controller to confirm this. And then obviously, yes, I figured out this is still part of Silo, but wow, so unexpected and really something I think that we needed this oomph of for this type of reveal after a very slow season. And it has been slow indeed. However, I do think these last two episodes really paid things off and helped tie up some of these dangling threads. Along with that, we had got confirmation that there were 50 silos. 51 technically is what Bernard said. So this correlates with there being 50 states in the United States plus the District of Columbia, Washington, D.C., which I would imagine is, like I said before, the central hub of the silos. This must be where they put the real people in control who are making the decisions and quite possibly the actual humans behind the AI voice. Or is Silo 51 kind of a hybrid where people can come and go from the silo back to the surface? And again, the entire world is not actually completely underground. This is something where I'm still kind of trying to work through, and I would love to know your thoughts. Do you think the entire civilization of Earth is underground in the silos, or do we think it's possible there are other spots in the United States with people on the surface? And that's one of the reasons why they're so worried about people getting out of the silos and wandering around, not just because they don't want the people from other silos seeing them, but because it would be pretty weird if a lot of people emerge from underground into a functioning society in other areas and they're not aware these silo experiments are even going on. Now, talk about a rebellion underground, that would cause quite the rebellion on the surface. And really, I've got to assume at this point the silos are in fact in Georgia. We've had confirmations from some of the relics we've seen underground, and now we know that Daniel is a congressman from Georgia, and it seems like he's got some political experience in the world for making changes. There was something referenced about New Orleans and something that he's done, so he's obviously building a resume, and really building the silo is probably the biggest resume builder of all. And if he is in fact one of the founding fathers and builders of the silo, could this guy be the big wizard behind it all in Silo 51? Could he have been the one in power initially, the ultimate head of IT of all of the silos? Now, obviously, it's been years and years and years since then, but could his descendants still be in charge in Silo 51? I think there's a really good chance of that. But my other question is, how would Helen have then ended up in Silo 18 where the Pez dispenser was? She obviously doesn't end up in the same silo as Daniel, because I'd imagine he's going to be in a silo with people in power, whereas Helen is just a reporter. Unless they end up getting together, somehow end up in 18 together, and the Pez dispenser stays there. So I am curious to know exactly how that ties in, if Daniel and Helen end up in the same silo, or if they are separated, and that's why the Pez dispenser is in 18. Now that we know what the safeguard is underground as well, and that on level 14, these toxins can be pumped into the silo to kill all of its inhabitants, what if they're able to block the pipe? Which it sounds like that's what Solo's parents were trying to do in Silo 17, and it makes me think Solo never saw his mom again. I mean, could she somehow be trapped on level 14 where she was trying to save things and clog that pipe years ago? Probably not, but you never know. I'll get more into Solo/Jimmy in Silo 17 later. But let's say they are able to stop the safeguard from happening. Does that mean that people could go out on the surface without suits because they don't need to worry about the poison being emitted to them that will cause them all to die before they can get in the range of another silo? Obviously, whatever this toxic poison or gas is timed to where it's emitted into the silo. Let's say it's because people are going to leave, right? So people get on the surface and it must have some sort of latency period where it is timed perfectly, where they end up dying before they get to another silo. So with no poison, does that mean they could just go freely roam on the surface? Could Juliette and a crew end up leaving, going back to 17, exploring these other silos to figure out the status, and eventually maybe moving into the city in the distance, which by all counts seems like it should be Atlanta if we are in Georgia? I'm still not sold that the air outside is completely toxic, because now that we know about the safeguard, And now that we know everything is pretty much a lie, I don't believe anything that anybody is saying, but we've still got 2 more seasons to unpack all of this. All right, so I've got to say, our stay in Silo 17 this season felt a little bit long. It was a slow burn and a slow ride. Like I said before, I think they could have introduced some of these Silo 17 characters sooner, so we had more of a connection to them, unless they really didn't care about us building more empathy towards these characters because we're never going to see them again. That is also possible. However, Solo/Jimmy has really become quite endeared to us, especially after the emotional impact of this episode. When we see him testing the suit for Juliette to make sure it's okay, and then that almost hug, I mean, they have come a long way, considering that Jimmy/Solo wouldn't even open the door for her at the beginning, to come full circle where they have these moments where they've solved some things, they've figured some things out, and Jimmy is trying to make sure our Juliette makes it back safely. I mean, come on. And can I just say, one of the moments that was so impactful in this episode was watching Jimmy in the mirror with his beard saying, wow, I got old. And let me tell you, as somebody who is in my middle age era, that really hit me. And I just think Steve Zahn has been so phenomenal as this character. While yes, he was annoying at times and the Silo 17 storyline felt a little bit drawn out, Steve Zahn was completely a bright spot in a very dark, literally dark on the screen season, and brought levity to Juliette's story and really also allowed Juliette to grow with her empathy and really her patience, right? So Lucas ended up telling Bernard the truth, and I gathered that the AI did not hear them because they probably would have initiated the safeguard sooner. I gotta tell you though, when Juliette came over that hill and Bernard was previously kind of given up on things after Lucas filled him in, he was walking around just so downtrodden and so sad. And then Juliette comes over that hill and the whole silo rejoices, except Bernard, who grabs a gun. This brings him back to life, of course. He puts a suit on and he goes to meet her. Ironically, all Bernard wants to do at this point, now that he knows the truth, is to go outside and feel free, which is the same thing the love of his life, Meadows, wanted. And he took that away from her. So maybe this is a nod to her because he wants to maybe allow her spirit to live vicariously through him leaving and going to the surface. But Bernie, you didn't make it, you got burned. He had told Juliette to hit the ground so it doesn't burn her up, and it did look like she kind of was flung off to the side. I just do not think Bernard could survive without a fire suit. I mean, even Juliette with a fire suit, it's hard to say how long these flames exactly last for. And also, why is the fire room even there? I assume it's because now we know about the safeguard and the fact that they pump these toxic gases out. Is this a way to kind of clear the chamber or this area of the toxic gases after they're emitted to the person who's going out to clean? I think that makes the most sense. Now, something I did have issue with in this episode is the timing of it all. So all of a sudden in Silo 17, they're hearing the explosion from Silo 18. Juliette and Solo were like, oh, we have to hurry. Juliette, I need to get back. I mean, what are the actual odds of the timing lining up where Juliette gets back to Silo 18 just in time to hold up the sign that says, it's not safe, do not come outside? Juliette finally ends up cleaning, right? I really had to suspend my disbelief for that more than anything because literally, there's just no way the timing could have coincided so well for Juliette to get back there and let everybody know while this rebellion successfully happened. I mean, okay, I'm glad we ended up where we did in this episode, but that was a really tough one for me to swallow. Did anybody else feel the same way? We waited so long for her to get back, and she just happens to come back in the nick of time. I believe I had mentioned that in a previous video and said something like, oh, watch, she'll get back there just in time. And in fact, she did. So I am probably not the only one with some major suspension of disbelief here. But I've got to tell you, Bernard figuring out that he really was a puppet this whole time and that he gave his entire life to this silo, which was essentially all for naught, I had some sympathy for him. I kind of felt bad for Bernard, especially after he got played by Walker. He really thought he was coming out of that thing on top, too. He had no idea that Knox and Walker had these hand signals. I had no idea they had the hand signals, but something I did know was that Knox knew Walker was being watched. I just wasn't sure how. So it was nice to get confirmation that, in fact, they knew what was going on. They were setting this booby trap, and it worked. But now that Bernard could potentially not be on the show anymore, it does worry me not having Tim Robbins, who really is the backbone of Silo 18. This means we're probably going to be seeing a lot more of the Sims family, and I'm sorry, I mean, Robert, you're cool and all, but you are no Tim Robbins common. I apologize, but I don't know how much of the Sims family in control, in power. I mean, truthfully, I do like Camille more than I like Robert. So from that perspective, okay, fine. But I just don't know that the Sims family has that same oomph that Bernard brought into that head of IT. And really, who's going to be the new big bad? Is Camille going to be an actual big bad? I mean, she does have the best interest of the silo at heart. She's been playing both sides of this to really elevate herself into this position. Has she been the big bad all along and was just kind of moving her way up? I mean, not that she was trying to take the position from her husband, but it does make a lot of sense that the AI picked her and told Robert and Anthony to leave. Can you imagine what Robert Sims was feeling in that moment when he finally gets his dream job, even if it was only sloppy seconds to Lucas and Bernard? I mean, what a devastating blow that must be, like to have your wife chosen over you after being the head of judicial. That's going to cause a ripple, and I expect that to be a big part of season 3 as well. And so what happens now, right? Like, what is the premiere of season 3 going to look like with Juliette emerging from that fire chamber? Is somebody going to rush in there, pull her out? Will she be able to open the door once the flames stop? I am not really sure. Will she have to be then treated and she goes to medical? Will she be okay and come out of it and they have kind of a silo town hall and she fills everybody in on what's going on? Are they just going to have a big coming home party? Because I got to tell you, the mood in the silo felt happier than it has in probably a really long time, like early season 1 times. And what is going to be next for Juliette? Is she going to be working with Camille? Is she going to end up being in a position of power herself? Or will she end up leaving the silo and going on an adventure like Dorothy in Oz? And the Wizard of Oz has been a big part of this whole thing. So I wouldn't be surprised if, after learning about the death of her dad, which, by the way, him sacrificing himself, giving that watch to Hank, that tore me up. And I do not envy the person that has to break that news to Juliette. And now that her dad's not there, I mean, yeah, of course she's got friends and loved ones, but will this fuel her curiosity to leave the silo and try to make a difference in this post-apocalyptic dystopian world now that she knows what's out there? We've got 2 seasons to find out. Another interesting tidbit we picked up was Bernard knows the who, but not the why. Is the who the big AI controlling things from Silo 51? Or, like I said before, is there a human cabal or human central government type of silo going on that is actually the one controlling the AI voice and pushing the buttons? Is the AI voice not actually an algorithm and there is a human behind it, like in The Wizard of Oz and the wizard behind the curtain and him being a complete fraud? I mean, not ruling it out, you guys, not ruling it out. And I'd also just like to say, if Bernard is no longer the big bad and we do need a casting for a big bad in Silo 51 if we ever get there, I've got some casting ideas. Could we get a Willem Dafoe or Christopher Waltz maybe in the mix here? Maybe a Samuel L. Jackson, a Christian Bale. I've got some ideas for our big bad in Silo 51. Who do you think would play a good ultimate big bad, which could be a future generation of Daniel who we saw in the bar? I don't know. I would love to know who you think could fill the shoes of Tim Robbins if he does not come back as Bernard. Okay, back to the rebellion in Silo 18. I will tell you, I obviously did suspect, as I said before, that Walker and Knox were making this big plan to trick Bernard. But what really got me was when Walker went to the jail cell and they were going to let Carla out. And she's like, hey, bitch, I hope they send you out to clean. I was like, burn baby burn. And I really liked when it came around full circle again and they reconciled. Just the genius of these hand signals, which is a product, of course, of them working in the generators. Walker taught these signals to the kids because it was so loud and they couldn't hear. So having that system and kind of keeping that from us, that's something they definitely could have introduced sooner as a form of communication in the silo. But instead, they kept it under wraps and made that big reveal a very important one. The way Bernard was laughing when he assumed that Walker did not actually have some plan at play when she did that little countdown thing, I've never seen him so happy before. And then when it actually did click that, oh no, there is some shit hitting the fan right now. I mean, the whole rebellion storyline and them tricking Bernard was everything. They were, in fact, able to blow up those stairs on a couple of the 90s levels. So that way the Raiders could not get back up to the top. They could attempt to find Bernard, learn the truth, potentially end up taking over IT. Now that we know about the safeguard, it seems like we're going to be on a pretty strict time limit here at the beginning of season 3 to get that safeguard shut down so the silo isn't poisoned. But again, we have 2 seasons to go. I can't imagine them actually triggering this safeguard in Silo 18 with 2 seasons to go, unless we do figure out the air on the surface is okay. Everybody gets out, but there's no way they're going to allow 10,000 people to leave the silo. I mean, even if the air is okay, I think they would have to send smaller parties of people. But what if everybody does want to go? Could there still be a rebellion fighting over who gets to go, who stays, or does everybody just retreat peacefully? I don't think this is going to turn into a surface level show, so I think it's unlikely, but it does make sense that Juliette and her party of the Tin Man and the Scarecrow and the Cowardly Lion all do end up leaving to go explore whatever is in the distance and maybe find that 51st silo that's in control, take it on, and shut those people in power down so that way all the silos that are still alive can live peacefully. And at the beginning of this episode, we had seen Knox and Shirley kind of filling in Doc Nichols on the war thing. And again, that really paid off when the timer wasn't there. Doc Nichols gave his watch to Hank and he sacrificed himself in order to make that happen. But what he said to Juliette, I mean, you guys, that just hit me. He asked Hank to tell her I love her, never stop fighting, never stop being herself, because her whole life she's been perfect, just the way she is. When Hank gives this message to Juliette, I mean, this is going to hit her like a ton of bricks. She had already lost her mother and her brother at a much younger age, and that caused her to retreat into the down deep and make the connections and work where she did. Her and her dad did not have a close relationship, although they started coming around a little bit before Juliette ended up leaving. But who really came around was her dad, Doc Nichols. I mean, he used to be a rule follower and then started thinking, you know what? I want to be more like my daughter, Juliette. I'm not going to take out this birth control. I'm going to allow these people who ask questions to have a baby. I just, again, do not envy the poor person that needs to tell Juliette her dad died. But he sacrificed himself for the good of the silo. He is a hero, and I hope Juliette is able to extract that to help her cope moving forward throughout the next 2 seasons. Okay, now to our new head of IT, Camille. She is the new head bitch in charge. HBIC Camille here, reporting for duty. Not reporting for duty, Robert. And sorry, Anthony, you've got to leave too. When they first go into the vault and the voice talks to them, Sim says, I want to save the silo, or we want to save the silo. And the voice says, I do too. I don't know if I believe that voice. I think it is just looking for a new pawn to put in control to do the dirty work and the bidding. Obviously, this voice knows about the safeguard. What is going to happen? Is Camille going to have to make some very difficult decisions? Will she end up maybe even working with Juliette? I'd imagine Juliette is going to get some time with Camille, who's the new head of IT. pretty early in season 3, but will that relationship be a friendly one or will it be contentious? What is this voice going to ask Camille to do? How fast is she going to learn the same secrets that Bernard and Meadows and Lucas know? I mean, they've got a lot of catching up on once they do go into the vault and they can see all of the relics and everything. So I'm really interested to see where Camille's story goes. And I think she's a great character. I think she's played it well. Like I said, she's been poising herself to elevate into a position like this. But I don't know if her character herself will be compelling enough as that big bad in charge. I think we're going to need another big bad because I imagine there's going to be quite a bit of strife between her and Robert, and that will be a focus. I can already picture myself being annoyed with Robert complaining that his wife got it instead of him. And who is Camille's new shadow going to be? Does that still fall to Robert as a de facto shadow? Or will it be someone else? Could Juliette emerge as Camille's shadow? The power struggle with the Sims and the new leadership of the silo is going to really dictate how things look next season. I just have this feeling that the AI voice is going to instruct Camille that she now needs to stop Juliette because I wouldn't be surprised if it filled her in about the safeguard and the fact that Camille needs to prevent Juliette from clogging that pipe. But at the same time, why, if Camille does find out about the safeguard, why would she want to prevent Juliette from doing that? Because obviously she wants to live too. So could she be this next generation of silo leadership who's not so intent on following the order and the pact to a T like Bernard did? Will she think outside of the box? Will she do things differently to usher in a new era of silo living? Is she poising herself to become and grow into a new big bad like Bernard? Or will she maintain some semblance of trying to be a good person? I mean, seeing her play both sides like that, I think Camille's going to have some difficult decisions to make, and I think she's going to be pretty sneaky. And I wouldn't be surprised if she ends up having to make a decision that impacts her and her family and potentially causes some real problems between her and Robert. Okay, back to Silo 17 again. We did seem to get some closure, and Juliette did tell them, I will try to get back there, but of course she couldn't make any promises. So really a big question is, are we going to see these characters again? I really thought that Hope was going to be able to leave with Juliette. Unfortunately, there were holes in the other suit, so that was not in the cards for her. But hopefully Juliette made enough of an impact with her speech about them having to get along and trust each other. So that way there is peace moving forward. At least, hey, now they're getting along with Jimmy. They've got some relics. They've got access to whatever food there is in the vault. But are we going to see Jimmy again? I mean, like I said, Steve Zahn just brought so much depth to this character. And yes, he was annoying at times. He had a child's mentality and was suffering from some pretty severe PTSD given everything that he had been through. I really want to see him again. I wouldn't mind if I'm not sure exactly how that will transpire, whether it is someone from 17 whether it's somebody from 18 going over to pay 17 a visit. Again, it's all kind of a wild card with the toxicity of the air or not on the surface. And if the safeguard was already disabled in Silo 17 and they can disable it in Silo 18, maybe they do all have a reunion on the surface and then end up going somewhere off together. Or we never see the inhabitants of Silo 17 again. Goodbye, Rick. Goodbye, Audrey. Goodbye, Hope. Goodbye, Jimmy. I hope that's not the case. The more silos that we can get a glimpse into, the better, as long as it is not as slow a burn as it was this season. The last thing I want for season 3 is for there to be like 8 super slow filler episodes and then 2 that are action-packed that give us what we want. Please, please, please disperse more of the good stuff throughout the earlier episodes of the season to keep us invested and not complaining that, it took so long to get here. And yes, we got here and the payoff is great, but I really wanted it to happen a little bit faster. And I don't think I'm alone. Please drop a comment and let me know your thoughts on the pacing of Silo Season 2. So Season 2 as a whole, I like where it ended up. It was quite a slow journey to get here, but now we've got a lot of questions going into season 3. We do have some storylines revolved. We had a lot of chaos happening, and I hope season 3 picks up with a bang. I don't know about you, but I was shocked to get the flashback of Washington, D.C., meeting Daniel, meeting Helen. As I've said, I've never read the book, so I actually have no idea what's happening. I've gone into this series completely blind and do everything I can to never ever read anything regarding the books. So if you have read the books, please do not drop anything about them here in the comments. I am so here for the silo ride. I just hope we start going more like, I don't know, 50 miles an hour in season 3 and 4 instead of 25 and hitting speed bumps along the way. Is Bernard alive? Are they going to be able to prevent the safeguard from happening? What exactly is going on in this origin story of the silos? Is Iran really the big bad? Is there a bigger conspiracy at play? Is it still possible that these silos are underground experiments and there are other people living in other parts of the US on the surface? Is the air bad, or was it just the toxic air of the safeguard that kills everybody when they leave the silo? I imagine we're going to get a lot of confirmation. And really, I think I want to know the most. I mean, is Bernard going to survive? Is he alive? Tim Robbins has just been the heart of this show. Rebecca Ferguson is great. We know she's confirmed for 2 more seasons. We don't necessarily know that for Tim Robbins, and I am kind of disappointed that we may never see him on Silo again. We may never see Jimmy and Steve Zahn again, so that's a loss of 2 pretty big characters. Are they going to bring in some bigger names to really beef this up for season 3? There's a big opportunity to bring in some bigger players for these flashback things for Washington, D.C. Nothing hits harder than seeing asshole politicians trying to preserve their power and money and make sure that they're poised to be exactly where they need to be. Well, unfortunately, all the other people suffer. I mean, there's 51 silos. Obviously, each state got to hand select 10,000 people. It's got to be people in government, people in power, the billionaires of the world. I don't think they just threw in everyday average civilians unless there was some kind of a lottery. Maybe we see a lottery system in season 3, but I am so excited for the origin story to get more lore into the silos, how we got here. You guys, I just can't wait. So please be sure to like, share, and comment. Hit the subscribe button. Let me know what you thought about this season. What are your biggest questions moving into season 3? Are you confused about anything? What are your thoughts on Camille taking power and that whole fire scene and how everything ended up in Silo 17? I'm dying to know what everyone thinks. So I'll see you in the comments. And one more thing. Thank you to everybody who has tuned in to my Silo coverage this season. I've really appreciated all of the comments, all of the likes. It has been a really great ride. So just some gratitude for everybody who's been along for it. Thank you. I really appreciate you tuning in. And again, I've got lots of other shows coming up, so do not miss them. We are eating good in TV land in 2025, you guys. I'll see you next time. Dropping my Severance video in a couple of hours, so stay tuned for that. Media Melanie, clicking off.